Create a Turbulence FD container and make a platonic. Center it in the middle of the Turbulence FD container. Next thing, create an emitter. Make the size fill the Turbulence FD container. Place it at the bottom of the Turbulence FD container and increase the length of your timeline. Change the settings for your emitter by increasing the particles and change the stop emission. Play with the speed, the lifetime, and the lifetime variation. Create a rotation force and rotate it 90 degrees in the pitch and change the angle speed. Create a turbulence force and change the strength and the scale. Click on the platonic and give it a Turbulence FD emitter tag. Give it a value of 1 in the temperature and of 0.7 in the fuel. Go to the force tab. Increase the velocity weight to 5. Create a Turbulence FD emitter tag and put it on the emitter. Check the fuel volume and increase the radius to 15. In the force tab, put the pressure to -0.1 and the velocity weight to 4. Don't add anything in the channels. Go to the Turbulence FD container. Check the vorticity and change it to 5.1. The turbulence, change it to 6. The temperature cooling, set it to 8. Go and open the Turbulence FD simulation window and hit simulate. You can see how the smoke is being affected by the emitter and the forces. Go to the fuel, enable it, change the expansion to 0.5, go to the platonic general tab and change the radius to 2. Right now we're just trying to play with the settings to get the right look that we're going for. As you can see, the smoke is rotating in a very nice, satisfying way. If you change the shader preview from smoke to fire, you can see it shows us the fire, but in our case we're not going for the fire, so we just put it back to smoke. And we change the color to something a bit darker. If you go to the emitter particles and click on the Turbulence FD emitter tag and go to the radius and change it to something like 30, you can see how this affects how big the smoke expands in the container. So you might as well just play with the radius and give it something in the middle that you're going to like. In my case, I'm going to lower it. Now we're going to keyframe the forces on the platonic so that they don't go on forever but they end. So in the middle of the timeline, I'm going to set a keyframe on the temperature value and on the fuel value, and I'll go to the end and I'll just set them to 0. I'm going to go and add a light and I'll push it to the left. I'll add the shadows to ray traced HUD. I'm going to duplicate the light and I'm going to add a background and give it a green gradient color. That's the result that we get. I also changed the substeps in the simulation tab of the solver to 2 and 2. That is because if things are moving really fast in Turbulence FD, you just need to up those values so that it can appear smooth and so that you don't have any artifacts. I'm going to add a disk just below where I want the smoke to be cut off or interact, and I'll add a Turbulence FD emitter tag, making sure that I'm checking the collision object. Next, I'm going to go in the content browser and grab a female character which is also pre-rigged, and it has everything that you need if you want a pre-rigged character. I'm going to delete everything, the textures and the rest of the body parts, and only leave the head. Make sure that you don't delete the rig as you are deleting. Make sure that you only delete the body parts. And I'm going to increase the timeline length. I'm going to go to the first frame and create a keyframe. And then I'm going to set auto key, and then I'm going to make changes. I just want to make an animation that looks like a mouth is opening and the head is moving. Make sure that at any point that you click on, you set a keyframe before you move forward, so that it can record those previous keyframes. In our case, we don't want this to look realistic since it's just going to be a smoke animation. You can make it as creepy as you want. Our animation kind of looks something like this. Right click on the head and bake as Alembic, and this will bake every animation that you have done. Now we're going to do simulation on the baked Alembic file. Create a cube and just make sure that the scale isn't very small for your head, so you can compare it to the size of the cube, and it has to be at least that size since the smoke in Turbulence FD works well with bigger scale, and it just looks a bit realistic for the tornado that we're creating. Now you can create a Turbulence FD container, and if your head appears too big, you can just scale it a little bit down and fit it inside of the container. Now change the settings, the voxel size, I set it to 2, and change the scale in the X, Y, and the Z so that the head can fit in the container. Just go in your project, copy the light, copy the turbulence, the rotation, and the emitter, and paste it in your new project. Change the settings in the following way. Go to the simulation tab, change the vorticity to 5, the turbulence set it to 12, the larger size set it to 9, and the smaller size set it to 1. In the temperature, set the cooling to 50. And add a Turbulence FD meter tag on the head. Change the radius to 2 and check View Object. Go in the pressure and set the pressure to -2.4. And go in the channels and set the temperature value to 1. Increase the voxel size to 4 as you are trying to sim, and just check where you want to save this. Now if we open the Turbulence FD simulation window and we simulate, you can see what we have. And if we check the shading in the rendering tab, set it to temperature and change the mapping on the last point to point, and change the color to something a bit darker, from dark gray to gray. Change the thickness to 50. Now if you resim, you can see the shape of the head being simulated with smoke. If your smoke dies off really quick, you can change the cooling to something like 80, meaning it will have the smoke emit a little bit further before it can die off. If you check the collision object in the Turbulence FD meter tag on the head will collide with the smoke, but that may not give you the results that you may be looking for. Copy your Turbulence FD of the first head, copy it to the project, and just move it below. Try as much as possible to match it and line it up with where the bottom of the tornado is. If you render the head on a blue background, you can see how the head looks like. Now you can render both the tornado and the head separately. In After Effects, you can see how the tornado looks like. Create a solid and put a gradient ramp on it, and put the color to green or a bit cyan, or in between green bluish cyan. Click on the tornado and go to time stretch and change the time to something like 125 to just make it a little bit slower. And since we didn't like render a lot of frames, now you can see how the smoke tornado looks like. This was rendered in the most lowest quality. That is because it's just for the sake of the tutorial and just to show you. Now I'm going to import the head simulation. I'm going to place it on top, and I want to make sure that I time it to where I want it to start. And I'm going to change the anchor point to put it, I'm going to put it below the neck or below the chin of the head simulation, so that when I just scale it, it scales from the bottom. I'll then add 2 keyframes for scale and position, and I'll move them forward. Then I'll just start trying to scale it down to make sure that it sort of stays in the middle of the tornado for the whole time. I also shift it in the timeline to find the right spot where it can appear in the timeline. I'm going to create a mask around the head, just masking the edges, and also trying to make sure that it blends with the tornado. And I want to review that mask over the course of the frames. So on here, it's just a matter of blending. I'm going to add the levels on the head simulation and just increase, just make sure that I put in some contrast to match it better with the smoke tornado. I'll then keep adjusting the position and the scale and the rotation for the head model, just so it can match how the smoke tornado is moving, and so that everything looks like it belongs within the same space. If we play through, you can see how the smoke tornado looks like and how the head kind of comes out and blends in together with the tornado. I'll then grab all the layers and pre-compose them. I'll first start with the lumetri color, so I can just have a little bit of some contrast in the scene. Next, I'm going to add 2 position keyframes, one at the beginning of the timeline and one at the end of the timeline. Then I'll go to Windows and add the wiggler, and I just want to add some camera shake, and I just want this to kind of feel a bit wiggly and like it has some strength. So just keep playing with the values, and every time you change values, just make sure that you click apply. If you don't like what you're seeing, just click undo, change the value, select both keyframes and change your values and hit apply again until you have what you like. I'm going to go to the plugins and add Real Smart Motion Blur to just add some motion blur. The last thing that I did is I set some scale keyframes to just create this sort of fake zoom in effect or scale in effect, to just make it look like I'm trying to zoom into the action and then just zoom back out. And if your scale keyframes are a bit sharp, just select them and change them to easy ease. But if you like how sharp it zooms in, then you have that effect. Now this may not look exactly like the preview because I didn't make this tutorial at the same time as I made the preview. I made it over some years, and I tried as much as possible to recreate everything that I did, to also just show you the method. I hope that you can make something better, or so thank you so much. I hope you've learned something, and I hope you know how you can manipulate Turbulence FD simulations with Cinema 4D forces. So see you next time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share. God bless, and never stop learning.